Welcome to a Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. Hello, welcome to a Better Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Vacca. And over the many years that I've been helping couples and clients and their unhappy marriages, the one thing that I can tell you for sure is that when both spouses accept that the marriage is over, there's an increased chance that they can have a better divorce with less animosity and less conflict. But getting to that point of mutual acceptance is rarely easy. And so that's why I'm very excited today to devote this episode to the topic of discernment therapy and how it can help couples get on the same page about whether to give the marriage more time or whether to end it. So my guest today is Kelley Hopkins-Alverez. Kelley's a licensed professional counselor in private practice in Ridgefield, Connecticut, and she specializes in non-adversarial divorce support, which helps couples and partners who are at the crossroads in their relationship, and helps couples when one person is uncertain about the marriage's future. So she does discernment counseling, which we'll be talking a lot about today. She also helps clients with healing separation support, which we'll talk about, and co-parenting counseling, couples therapy, affair recovery, and sex therapy. So regardless of the issues that bringing a couple to her, all different parts of the relationship, she can help them figure out what to do next. So Kelley, welcome to a Better Divorce podcast.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So, I've mentioned discernment counseling to clients, and they don't always know what it is. And I'm sure other people listening don't necessarily know what discernment counseling is. So why don't we start by you defining what it is exactly?
Well, I'm really pleased to be able to get more information out there about this little known process. It is getting, I guess, more coverage, and it's really within your field, within the legal field, getting a lot more referrals from them. So discernment counseling is really, when you think of someone leaning into a marriage, someone who wants to work on the marriage, and someone leaning out. And there could be different degrees. And generally, it's not both people leaning out. It could be, but that's sort of a mixed agenda couple. These couples could have had couples therapy before, but that isn't necessarily the case. In fact, many have not had discernment, but one party has decided they no longer want to work on the marriage. And again, it could be to couples therapy that didn't really take care of the negative cycles, or it could just be so much time has gone by in the marriage that from that person's perspective, they sort of have lost hope. They've started in many cases to live sort of a parallel sort of life with their partner. And there are a lot of other things we'll probably get to today that there's sort of signs of where that partner is. So I'm really glad to be able to talk about discernment. It's very nuanced. And the more we can answer questions and share, the better.
Yeah. So what exactly happens if somebody comes in for discernment counseling? What is it that you're trying to help them decide? What are the routes that they can take?
That's a great question. So there's 3 paths in discernment. We should probably start with that. When they come in, we're talking to them about Dr. Bill Doherty created this model. It came out of Minnesota. It actually was started unknowingly from a family court judge who was sort of counting on a daily basis when the couple was signing that last document, the divorce decree, I think it's called, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were saying these statements such as, I don't know, did we do all we could? Is this right for us? Are you sure? And roughly he counted, if he had 10 cases, 3 out of 10 were stating this. And he really didn't feel comfortable. And we don't know the name of the court judge. It's so interesting. His name is not part of the model. So he called the local university, University of Minnesota. He got Dr. Bill Doherty on the phone, and he is a therapist and professor at the university and also does a lot of research on couples and relationships. And he said, you really got to do something for these couples. So that's sort of how the model came to be. And what we're doing is we're helping them look at three paths. Path one is staying in the status quo. And no one really wants that. When they come in, we get them to sort of rule that out quickly, sort of
Okay.
stay stuck. Path 2A, if you will, is discussions of a healing or therapeutic or controlled separation. Path 2B is discussions of non-adversarial divorce. I'm sure we'll share a little bit about what non-adversarial is. And path 3 is moving to 6 months of couples therapy with divorce off the table and an all-out effort to work on the marriage. So that's 3 paths presented to them.
And when you say divorce off the table, you mean for those 6 months? We're not going to be talking about divorce. We're going to work on the marriage, but they both have to be committed to it.
Yes, and to get from discernment to couples therapy, it's a process. We're mental health perspectives. I'm a licensed professional counselor, so nothing I have them sign is anything legal. It's an agreement between both parties that we agree during this time period to be vulnerable and to actually work on the stated goals that the discernment counselor had worked with them to create. So to get from discernment to couples therapy is not easy. It's not like, oh, we should do it for the kids, or how about we try this? It's very intentional.
And I would imagine it's not easy because a lot of them have been in couples therapy. They've been in couples counseling often, and it didn't work. And what I've seen is that forcing one partner who's asked for the divorce to go to traditional couples therapy when they've tried it, or they never tried it because whatever the reason was, it's usually a waste of time. You can't force someone into therapy because they have those mixed agendas with that one leaning in, one leaning out, right? And I love that you said there's a degree to which they're leaning out or in, I guess. So how would a couple know if discernment counseling is something they should try when they've given therapy a chance? What are they going to see that's different? How would you be able to convince somebody that this might be a good option for them? Not you convincing them, but the partner who wants to try a little harder. They're probably going to be the one to say, can we try this now? So
Yeah.
how will they know if it could be a good fit?
It's usually a challenge with the leaning out person. A lot of times they are thinking this is therapy. So it's counseling, which means the therapy part is sort of the couple looking at each other, digging deep, going really deep down into those emotions. In discernment counseling, the whole format is different. So it's the format is together at the beginning of the sessions, each one individual. So the one would go to the waiting room and then working with one here, and then we switch. And then in the end, we're bringing them back together. In the individual sessions, I've worked with each of them to craft some statements that they want to share with their partner. I've also helped them review some core questions. What have they done to try to repair the marriage? So that's a very enlightening process. People will sit there and go, what? And I'll ask them, have you seen a couples therapist? Have you read any books, podcasts? Have you taken any, I don't know, sabbaticals, anything to work on yourself, individual therapy? So we'll look at if there was couples therapy, what worked, what didn't work. Quite often, the original couples therapy, there wasn't an agreement to go into it in the first place. So
Right.
in discernment, we have to be very careful that everyone understands it's not therapy. It's a discussion. It's time limited. It's sort of the marriage is now in the ER. And I find when I speak to prospective clients, I'll say, what is your best alternative to this process? I don't know who taught me that question, but whoever did, it might have been Bill Doherty, the creator of the model. People will sit back. And of course, if they're co-parents, it's somewhat easier to have them join a process like this because the co-parenting is not working.
Right. There's such conflict and
Yeah.
so angry and resentful. They can't even co-parent. They can't
No.
work together. And what is that doing to their children? That best alternative question is something we talk about in non-adversarial divorce? What's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement? If you don't come to an agreement, what what else can happen? You
Right.
can live without an agreement, you can go to court, so what are your options, right? So that's where we call it DATNA. So,
Yes.
and maybe that's where it came from.
I remember learning that it was either the mediation or the collaborative
Yeah.
divorce process, excuse me, the training. I've taken that training, but as a mental health neutral in the process. So I am not a mediator. I cannot write any legal agreements. I'm supporting the emotional and the behavioral process with the couple. And with my background in education as well, my other master's is in counseling, and I have a school counseling and a teacher certification also. I can help them with some of the developmental aspects of, should they divorce? What do we need to do now for their home environment for the kids? So basically, we're getting them working on something, and
Right.
that generally we're looking at what is your home environment like now. So that's sort of how we're beginning the work.
Yeah. So, being able to talk about what's best for the children, understanding child development, that'll help them
Yeah,
in whether they're staying together or separating, how to have that conversation with the children about whether they're doing a separation or a divorce or living in different bedrooms or whatever might be happening to help
yeah.
get them to discern what to do with their marriage. You said it's not a long process, what or a short-term process, but how long are you usually in discernment counseling? Like, what are we talking about? How long will that last that you're in it?
That's a great question. So, couples therapy sort of goes on indefinitely, but generally within a 6-month time frame. Dr. John Gottman, I believe, is the one who, the famous couples therapist, New York Times bestseller, uh, as well as scientist from the University of Washington. He's done a lot of the seminal research on couples. Usually says about 6 months. We need a minimum if there's no affair. A lot of my work with discernment also would include couples where affair has happened. And so we look for a minimum of 6 months if there's no affair to not only work on the marriage, and that's couples therapy. Discernment counseling is very time sensitive because the marriage is in the ER. So if couples therapy is a minimum of 6 months and upwards of a year if it's um, an affair involved, discernment is up to 7 sessions. And
Oh,
Dr. Doherty created it that way. He didn't want it to morph into couples therapy without anybody realizing it. And you can't really keep someone in the ER for a long time. So there the ER sort of analogy is helpful for people to understand this work needs to be done now. They've been in the status quo for so long. We are really trying to help them. We're trying to also structure a case. So quite often I will have them get an individual therapist, each of them. I'll have them sign consents. So I will sort of case manage and make sure that individual therapists know what discernment is, send them information, and let them know that there is a leaning out, there is a mixed agenda couple here, and we want to do everything we can so they have the opportunity to review their marriage, how it got to this place, what role did each person play, um, and is it possible that either of them can really change from that role, and sometimes they can, but at minimum we want them to work on themselves and understand relationally how the dynamic formed with the couple. And remember those goals to get to couples therapy? You'll notice with participants when they get kind of curious about the dynamic and their role, if that curiosity will lend itself to actually goal production to
mm,
move to couples. And then that's always an exciting session because I'm also a couples therapist. So I've been married 31 years. I love that session because I have them sit and they share their goals with each other and they talk about it. Do we think going into discernment is something that is workable for us? So it's a very mindful and conscious process. We're trying to have balance for people who are kind of in one of the worst places of their lives.
oh, yeah. Being on the fence like that is, it's so painful and so destructive, and I've had clients come to me and they've been, they might have said they wanted a divorce 2 years ago and nothing changed. And they bring it up every once in a while. And it's like, it's falling on deaf ears at this point because their partner doesn't believe them anymore and nothing's changing. Of course, nothing's changing. And they're just living like this. And then when they finally announce they want the divorce, it's like a shock. Because what do you mean? It's real this time, So it's a very difficult situation to be in, and they're still hesitant. Do I really want the divorce? So to be able to get clarity about one way or the other. I use this analogy sometimes. We have something we call pre-divorce guidance for those couples that are not yet, or it's usually an individual. It's only an individual who wants the divorce, but it hasn't really announced it yet with full force.
Right.
And sometimes I'll talk to them about discernment, but I feel like when they finally come to me, they're on the other side of the fence now, but they're holding on for dear life to the fence. Like they're not ready to let go. And their spouse is still on the other side, doesn't even know they're over the fence. So it's I this idea of this kind of counseling could be really helpful so that they know if they should stay or go, because that's such a stressor, on themselves and the relationship.
I always say, why wouldn't we take the time? Why wouldn't you take the time to do this? You've been together many of my couples have been together for the bulk of their adult lives, that they may have met in college. And, with children, I always say this statement, which I learned at a conference. You always take away at a certain stage in your career, you take away one essential thing. And it was, they're going to be co-grandparents. And when I say that, I can feel the heaviness. So as co-grandparents, we have to have a relationship, a different one. And you want to be able to figure out during this process, what would it look like if you told your kids? And sometimes during discernment, there isn't a lot of back and forth with the couple because there isn't an agreement to do deep work, because we're together in the beginning of the session, individual, one goes to the waiting room, then we switch, and then together. But at some point, we will talk about if there is discussion of separation or divorce, what are the conversations like with the kids? Me just sending healing separation, or if I'm working with a couple in couples therapy and I'm kind of starting to see that they might need information about discernment, sometimes just sending them the information is enough for them in couples therapy to go, let's do the work. And sometimes one person said, oh, this is exactly what I need. Mm. So we do a lot of timing as therapists, and I like to do that in the room. I'm very much, for this process, an in-person therapist.
Yes.
I do have, for my co-parents who are already divorced, that is mostly a Zoom session. I found with people who are divorced, we are very, very focused, and we're agenda-based, and they share their agendas with me before the session, and we just work on those points. But for people who are doing discernment, personally, this is just a personal choice. Everyone is different.
Yeah.
If they're in driving distance, and I've had people drive pretty far, and there's 10 of us in Connecticut, I can there's people in New York and all over the country, try to find someone local. Because every once in a while, you do need those tools that a trained therapist has. There's a lot of grief for a couple who's at this place. A lot of guilt sometimes, and grief, and we want to be there for you.
Yes, and you find that being in person is really to see them and feel them and have everyone in one room is more powerful and more healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Make someone a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and I have a private waiting room, and I'll say, you can keep the door closed if you like, whatever you need. It's surrounding with books, it's soothing. It's getting them out of their home. The last place you'd be doing this is with even children on the property. They can't hear this. And we really have to be careful with this process. We don't want the kids knowing anything more than they've observed or been part of. until the couple knows. And so this process is reminding them we're going to be strategic, we're going to be planful in our work.
That's so important because kids know. They hear things, they feel things, they know what's going on, even if you're not saying it out loud.
That's right.
Um, what about the issue of, you mentioned earlier, who's to blame and who's at fault? Like, how do you deal with that in discernment counseling? How does the issue of blame and fault come up or not come up? What
Well,
happens there?
it's dealt with very carefully, especially if there was an affair involved. We have to put on our very special gloves because that person's brain kind of got run over by a truck, the person who didn't have the affair. So they're traumatized, their brain is very dysregulated, and the person who had the affair knew it was happening. And in non-affair cases, what we're doing is we are just trying to hold initially a safe space for them to be, slowly but surely entering into this concept of each person having a role. I have to be very careful. I have to look at where both parties are at, because the model hinges on really understanding the dynamic of the marriage and all of the negative cycles: communication, money, sex/intimacy, parenting, chores, time, careers, self-care, really looking at kind of what's stacked against us in marriage. And every once in a while, when a couple or a member of the couple will hear sort of norms, oh yeah, that's a typical issue, that's not atypical. One person wrote to me recently and said, thank you for telling us that. I thought our problems were unique and that we couldn't fix it. So we use different strategies to try to introduce. For some, they come in knowing that they've had a role. And some people have the opposite problem. They've taken the entire role. So we go through our steps and we revisit and we layer. That's why having the individual therapist is so important, because they have to develop a fitness almost for the discernment counseling, especially for clients coming to you when they're prepared by people like discernment counselors. They understand that the legal provider is not for crying. They're not for hearing all the history. As much as you're, empathetic and compassionate, the place to do that is with me. And part of that has to be done. There's so much support needed in discernment. You know that in mediation, collaborative divorce. And when both people have an individual therapist that's trained in these models, your work is just, those couples.
Yes,
So much
absolutely.
for them.
For them, for their wallet, right? I mean, they're going to get a better outcome. And I'll say, do you have a therapist? If not, do you need a referral to one? Are you working with a coach? Maybe there's a coach on the team. Speak to the mental health professional that's part of this process to help manage those emotions and those feelings and find the words and the communication that you need to be heard, because like you said, we're as empathetic as they come, but
Yes.
we're not trained therapists. I that issue of somebody being betrayed, and wanting, thinking, okay, the marriage is over, and the person who did the betraying, but they don't want it to end. They don't think it's as serious, or they want to be forgiven, or they will never do it again, or whatever is coming up for this couple. Understanding that there's some responsibility going back and looking at the layers for how they got to this place, that you can do that in 7 sessions. Like, you can help a couple like that discern and that quickly.
Great question. The sessions are very long. They're intensive sessions.
Oh,
So yes, thanks for asking. The first session's 150 minutes, and every discernment counselor does it a little differently, as
okay.
every legal provider would. And sessions 2 through 7 are 120 minutes. It's a long, and there's no hard and fast rule. Dr. Doherty has mentioned if a couple needs another session or two, but what we don't want is we don't want them being in the status quo. We're not also trying to jar them into a decision either. I could say in general, 7 to 9 sessions are within the range. And some people will talk about the healing separation when we get to that, but sometimes we are layering the healing separation because one person can't really do the discernment as well as they could if their brain wasn't re-triggered by seeing this person all day long, like their dirty dishes or how they spoke to the kids. So discernment doesn't, sometimes we'll pause the discernment for a session and structure that healthy separation with at least one person spending some time outside of the house so we can then have more productive conversations. So I'm always looking, what does this couple need to have the fitness to do this process so we don't waste anyone's time or money and that they can get the most out of it. They need us to guide them during this, it's a very sad time. This isn't a happy time when people are coming in for discernment. There's if you've had grief work as a therapist and you've done grief work, it's helpful because you can't be too bubbly or you always want to be positive, but you have to respect this isn't fun. This is very sad.
Right. I can feel the heaviness, just by you talking about it. And, it has a wonderful goal to make a decision, a real decision together about which way you're going. The end result is enlightening, but the getting there could be very heavy and sad, and to respect that where they are. So I definitely want to talk about this healing separation process. Like what is that? What does that mean? How does it work? How does it play into discernment counseling? Tell
Sure.
us more about that.
So healing separation was created by Dr. Bruce Fisher. He died too soon before this model became more global. So we're much more familiar with discernment counseling. The founder is still training us. We have access to him regularly and in trainings. So that's very real, very participatory. Dr. Bruce Fisher died quite a while ago. I think it was in the late 80s. And he left us with this template. He had worked with people out in Colorado, I believe. And I learned of this model, not in graduate school, not in my training. It's not really part of our training. I learned it from a therapist in Norwalk, Connecticut, probably about maybe 10 years ago now. And I've been sharing it with other therapists. I've been teaching about it. I get asked to go into some of the schools that are, preparing therapists. It's kind of amazing that we don't have it. So when you think about our training, which is very individual psychology based, we really need more training on sort of the systems, which includes families and couples. And healing separation is basically with the goal in mind to be intentional, to be mindful, and to slow down. Discernment is slowing down. Healing separation is slowing down. Because when people are upset, when someone's found out about an affair, even if there's no affair, they want to end that pain. That's why they go to you first. They want their day in court. You're right under the judge, right? Judge, attorney. Someone has to listen to their pain. And our role with the healing separation is to try to be co-architects with them about how can they have the fitness to go through a process like this. So it is involved with having follow-up sessions. I send them, when I determine that someone needs healing separation, I send them a very thorough agreement like the one I sent to you. Talks about having an individual therapist. It talks about not making any litigation moves. When you do that, that creates an adversarial stance. And if I have a member of a couple who does that, I say, get it back. We just started. That's throwing this whole, I'll pause the process. I said, I am not I can't do this process with that threat, because the other client is, everything is just turned upside down. Everybody has a right to legal resources, but the whole formalizing, putting a retainer down just shifts all of our energy. And I've learned over the years, I have to withdraw from those cases,
Yeah.
because we can't do a healing separation with someone who just is dropping bombs like that. If they're
Yeah.
working as a team and they both decide they want to do that and they're seeing me, it's a little different. So I think you have another question.
Is a healing separation like literally like we're going to separate and live apart, or are we going to stay in the home and co-parent separately? Or what exactly are we talking about when we say, healthy separation, healing
Yes.
separation?
Well, again, remember when we talked about discernment being the ER? Healing
Yeah.
separation is more putting the marriage into a coma. And sometimes couples are in discernment where it becomes evident that a healing separation is needed. Sometimes a couple will come in. The day I start with them, the partner is moving in tomorrow to an apartment, or they moved in last week. So there's a lot of moving components happening at once. And I have to really organize us, like, can we do discernment right now today? Or do we actually need to review the healing separation document and make sure that it's planful and organized, which will then give us the space to then do the discernment. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So at that point, you might help them agree on what they need for the separation to be a mutually agreed upon, calm, working, and maybe there's some legal components to it that they need to talk to their attorneys to get into place, how everything's going to be paid for, when they're going to see the children. It's not just this reactive, I'm out, and now what happened, and all the fear that can bring up by being separated without an agreement.
It's almost like they're disassociating from reality when they say, I'm out, I'm done.
Yes.
Nice knowing you, Kelley. I always have a group text with my clients. Nice knowing you, Kelley, but they concealed something from our sessions. I'm done. Good, nice knowing you, to their partner. It's not real, because they are intertwined with their partner and they have children, but it's that automatic response to a threat the brain has.
Right.
Right.
I
But that's
know.
what
And
I'm
if
saying.
you don't do the, if you wait until it's like a pressure cooker, these marriages, and if you move out because you just can't take it anymore, oh, the problems that causes, and that we have to untangle and correct before we can really start focusing on
Right.
a long-term separation,
Yes.
and forget about working on the marriage, probably because of all the issues that will bring up. So, taking it slower, slowing it down if you can, highly recommended.
Yes. The healing separation is really designed to, it's generally, I normally see it last 1 to 3 months. I don't really see couples, again, back to that wisdom from Dr. Doherty, who he didn't create the healing separation, but it's very applicable here. He created discernment. We can't really ask a couple that is this stuck to go for very, very long. Everyone needs a sense of autonomy, decision making over their life. And I want to switch back to one thing you said earlier. If someone needs legal questions answered, I introduce what mediation is. Why don't you give a call to a mediator? You can even Google questions to ask a mediator. You guys can generate a list of questions. You can sit with, combine the questions. I send a list of mediators that I know and I've had cases with before, or new people that I've come across that their work is, they're so committed to this process. Ask them this question, because a lot of people, they're getting their information from the peanut gallery.
Yeah.
And I always say, please send anyone that's in your life that you love the healing separation. Let them know, because they love you. They're going to show up and they're going to tell you what to do and what their cousin did. Send them the healing separation. Let them look me up online and let them know we have someone who is working with us in this process. And I will give them names of legal providers. And I do give a little bit of scare tactics. I have to be honest. And it's not a scare tactic. It's information, which probably comes across as well, hopefully to them, I don't want to do that. I'll say the last thing you want to do in this non-adversarial process you've started, whether it be discernment, healing, separation, or both, or couples therapy, is for your partner to look at the credit card statement and see such and such law offices and $500 for their
Yeah.
first meeting. It literally is throwing everything out the window that we've done. And I find if I give clients a few anecdotal sort of no-nos, they appreciate that this is not how you conduct yourself,
Right.
a transparent process. But it's hard. It's hard because when you don't have love and attachment and you see your partner across the room and they have put in all of these boundaries with you, it sets off alarm bells with attachment and bonding.
Yeah.
And we know there are different levels of attachment. We have anxious attachment, secure attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized. And that work comes from Dr. John Bowlby, and Sue Johnson has done a great deal of work really talking about, as children, whoever our primary attachment figure was, we develop cues from them that they love us, that they're there for us, and they're going to be engaged with us. When we find a partner, wouldn't you know it, they become our primary attachment figure. So a lot of the challenges that you and I and other wonderful people who are part of this, very small, I'd say niche work, we have to be trained in attachment.
Yep.
To understand. And people who come to this process, you say, how do you do it in 7 to 9 sessions? The combo of them doing individual work and understanding their attachment style. It's not okay to keep pursuing your partner. There's a pursuer and a distancer with discernment or healing separation. Someone is pursuing the marriage.
Yes.
Someone is distancing, and sometimes they change places.
Oh,
And
that'd be
so
interesting.
when they understand just a little bit, they're not here for therapy with me. I am a couples therapist, but in these instances, discernment and healing separation, I'm giving them a little bit of that relationship psychology so they can better understand their own moves. And in the individual parts of discernment, I'm also making observations and letting them know what we're not doing is going back to their childhood. That's individual therapy. I have to be very focused on what we're doing. And with every new couple, one of them might leave you a voicemail after the session and say, do you know how much so-and-so drinks? Or do you know how much, whatever, different parenting styles. There's this feeling that I have to keep re-explaining what my role is because they've never seen a discernment counselor. It's not in the news. It's not on shows. They haven't seen a healing separation. So it's not known. So because I'm the mental health provider, I'm not there to solve someone's substance issue. Right. That's something that I will have providers that I will refer. And of course, there are very, very rare cases that someone can't participate because of a substance issue. And I have, on a very limited basis, had to stop our process. But in general, most people can participate. And that includes untreated mental health issues.
Right.
Those are cases very rarely where I've had to pause our work, get them set up with someone individually, tell everybody just slow down, everybody just wait. This person needs to get started with a therapist and have at least, whatever the individual therapist and they decide, a number of sessions so they can come back to the process and do it.
And actually be able to do the therapy and the counseling that they need and be a partner in this, right?
Yeah.
This has been so interesting. I've been thinking about having this topic on the podcast for so long, and you're so well versed in it. And I'm so grateful that you've been able to explain not only what it is, but how we got here, how your profession created this, and the need from which it came. And I'm really thankful that you were able to join us today. So I always ask all my guests, what is your one better divorce tip from your place in this world, what would you say to somebody getting divorced? What's your tip to have a
The
better divorce?
That's a great question. The number one thing I would say is to find one of the best relationship-based individual therapists that you could find. That whole fitness, this is a long process. It's shorter than it was, right, years ago. But I that would be my number one. And, a lot of times people have barriers to getting therapy due to cost, needing in-network providers. There's usually no availability within network. Out-of-network providers, we're all very booked. So this isn't an easy thing to do,
Right.
to find a therapist. There are many barriers, but if you're considering divorce, begin therapy before you start the process if you can. If you have already begun the process, you could always say to your mediator, collaborative divorce process, I'd like to pause for a little bit.
Mhm.
They're happy to do that. They prefer to work with people that are ready for the process.
Yes. Ready, willing, able to do this and to have both people. That's why I said it really, I started and said, you're going to have a better divorce if you're both on the same page that this marriage is actually over. So if whatever help you need to either make that decision or accept that that's where things are and see your role so that you can move forward, I think it's a wonderful, better divorce tip to get therapy for yourself. Thank you so much, Kelley. So how can someone find you? Where can someone reach out? How would they find you?
I love that question. Thank you very much. So
Okay.
KelleyHopkins-Alverez.com. They could also contact me. I have a work cell, which is 203-948-0938. They can send me a text and introduce themselves. When they do that, it's great if they do that with their partner. They can, phone calls are challenging. I usually like to hear from couples first to learn a little bit about where they are in the process to see if I can be useful for them, and then schedule and follow up with a phone call. And I will usually send you a welcome letter that's very detailed. There's information on how I work, some videos about whatever process you're interested in, and some research. So you can read that. Cost. For out of network, there will be a link for codes that you can contact your insurance provider, find out what, if any, you'd be getting back, and then give me a sense you want to call, and we'll schedule a call.
Wow. There's no question will be left unanswered even early on. I love that. And if somebody's not in your area, you said you can refer to other discernment counselors outside of outside of Connecticut or in other parts of Connecticut or the country, I assume. So they can reach out for that as well. I
Absolutely
imagine.
can, and I'm happy to do a search for them, or also give them the link to the discernmentcounseling.com website. And we are a tight-knit group. Dr. Daugherty luckily allows us to train together, and we do Zoom for that. We recently had an in-person event as well. Everybody went to Minnesota. This is a commitment, this process. You, myself, the other people the certified divorce financial analysts, the CDFAs, we're very committed to stopping the trauma. We've all seen it. And we get excited when people want to have a better divorce. I love the name of your podcast.
Thank you.
It's really,
that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it's what you're doing. That's what's up.
Oh, yeah, that's it. So thank you so much, Kelley. All right, this has been another episode of a Better Divorce podcast. Please, if you like this episode or share it, we really appreciate that. And we will see you on the next episode. You've been tuning in to another episode of a Better Divorce podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.